Hey everyone, my name is Elio Narciso. I'm the co-founder and CEO at SkillStack. Welcome to the Revenue Engine Masters podcast, where, as you know, we deep dive into go-to-market and sales ops and marketing ops and revenue and how to find cutting-edge ways to transform how business grow today. Today, our guest, and I'm so happy to have you here, Javier, is Javier Molina, a seasoned CRO with a proven track record leading go-to-market teams at companies like MongoDB, Docker, Starburst. And I think that what's interesting about your career is that you built large enterprise sales teams, but you also have a knack for and a deep understanding and passion about bottom-up selling motions. And I thought that that was super interesting in seeing your career. You've been leading several enterprise teams, serving millions of developers. So you have a deep understanding of that buyer. And in general, you are an expert on open source monetization and developer first go to market. So I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff talking about, that we can talk about today. So welcome, Javier. I don't know if you want to share anything else about you with the audience.
No, thank you. Quite the intro. I appreciate it. And I don't know about expert. Definitely learned. I have my battle scars and learned by fire. And I think you did a good job introducing me. And I think you're one of the only people that says my name correctly besides my wife. So thank you.
You told me that and said that I speak Spanish, and so that's why I enjoy saying it properly, but also because everybody mispronounces my name, and so I have a passion for getting those names right. But yes, you made me laugh when we met in person the first time, and you told me only your wife calls you that way, and sometimes it's to
Only when
anyway.
I'm in
Yes.
trouble usually.
Very good. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being here. One of my last guests in this was Roman Grun, also former Mongo. And in his podcast, he basically had almost a love letter to sales in the sense that he shared how difficult is sales, especially tech sales. And that he empathizes and wants to build great go-to-market ops teams that help the really difficult job of sales. And so since you've been a seller and you've been leading teams and been a CRO, how difficult is tech sales today? And
Yeah,
why
it's
is it maybe more or less difficult than, say, 5 years ago?
a really good question. To preface it, I actually think tech sales is easier relative to other professions, for what it's worth. Like, if you don't know anything about my background, I did not I did not have a career or aspiration to be in sales when I first, was in college. I had a capstone class with a professor that used to sell horse shampoo, and he taught me all about, objection handling and prospecting and making cold calls, which is where I found my passion for sales. And I worked at my first job was selling industrial supplies, and I had to cold call oil fields. I had to go out and meet with them, understand their needs, go back to the office, put in the order, place the order, then wait for a sprinter van to show up, then unload the van, then box it up, and then deliver it back myself to the customer. So, and I made 3% on every sale. So when you're selling $300 worth of nuts and bolts, you can do the math there. It's not that much money. My next job was selling security systems. I worked 7 days a week. I was the number one rep in the country, and I made $62,000. So when I tell that story, especially with BDRs and people that are early career, in the sense that not of, I walked both ways in the snow to school, but more so, when I got to software and I was being asked to make phone calls in the air condition, and they were paying me, 50% more than I was being paid at my last job, where I worked 7 days a week and did nights, and I put 50,000 miles on my car in 2 years. I thought it was relatively easy, based on what my experience had been. And so, I think, I think it is a very complex job. It's not for the faint of heart. Tech sales is. I think that there's a lot of, you have to be willing and open to learn, willing and open to develop yourself. I think that your personas are extremely technical. I think that you're dealing with, massive technology waves that are happening right in front of our eyes. And so there's a level of drive, ambition, intelligence that you have to carry with yourself every single day. And I think with that, it is a difficult job, but I think we also get paid pretty well for what we do. And I try to ensure that level of humbleness and lack of entitlement is embedded into all my sales teams.
I love that. It's great. Recently, like one of my investors, or not my investor, but like investors in SkillStack posted about his dad being one of the top sellers in the Ontario food market. So he's based in Toronto, and his dad, for like 50 years, has been working 6, 7 days a week at the Ontario food market. And he got profiled in a newspaper there in Canada, and the story went super viral because, I mean, imagine how much has his dad learned over his life about like all of the things that we care about, like caring for your customer, caring for quality, caring for like, attention to detail, and like, picking the right, like, product for like your customer. So it was an incredible story. And, it's basically what you're saying,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
which
relative to what I call the real world, where my wife was a social worker and she got paid as much as a teacher salary, and I think it's just absurd the pay differential and complexity and difficulty between what I do and what she used to do. And same goes for first line workers. And my mom was a pharmacist in hospital, so I think it's just I can go on and on this topic, but I just think it's a good perspective to have. That I think we're incredibly fortunate to be in tech sales, and while it is complex and difficult, there is we relative to other careers, I think it's a great career to be in, but it's also a lot of fun.
very good. I love that. Yes. And so you mentioned different type of like selling jobs, and then you build these revenue engines that like across databases companies or analytics or developer tools. And then like the other examples that you mentioned, what are like the patterns that you think are universal in like the across different product categories for sales? And
Yeah, sorry. I think in terms of patterns, I think there's a couple of them. One, regardless if it's data or infrastructure or analytics, I think it's right time, right place, right? Like even if you look at the history of Datadog, before Datadog there was Source Labs, and a company I used to work at called SolarWinds. Um, Datadog really came along with the timing of DevOps, right? You had Vertica, and then you had Snowflake. You had MapR and Hive, which Databricks ended up winning that space. So I think there's an element of right time, right place, and timing with the market and trends. It's not to say that the initial thesis or technology was wrong, but more so the timing of the market, right? Even when you look at Mongo, um, the timing was perfect. It was when SaaS was coming online. It was when applications were becoming more modern. It's when DevOps was turning into a huge role in the developer space. So right time, right place, I think is one pattern. Two, I think the right level of execution um, across all of those markets or segments, I think is still relevant. So meaning you know, um, going to market and the way that you feel like is relative to the company. So PLG versus enterprise, or open source adoption versus outbound prospecting. I think the right mix and the right level and understanding how you win is really important to that. And so, whether you're selling to data engineers or DevOps teams or CIOs, there's an element that kind of is that you can apply across the board.
And so timing, very important, and like being like at the right time with the right product. What about like the customer and the persona themselves? I had a different guest, and like he shared with us. This is Chris Denoya, the CRO, and he shared with us that like he wants his salespeople to love their customers. That you need to be passionate about like the actual people that you're selling to, otherwise like you're not gonna care enough. And so you I think we mentioned at the beginning that like you've built like large enterprise sales teams, also have like a deep understanding of bottom up selling motions. How do you like sell into like so many different type of personas? What has been like important for you as you develop your career?
I think ultimately you're tying a couple things together. One, you're tying the actual users of the technology and together, and the adoption of the technology and the because I think if you don't, in the space that we're in, where like I think about it a lot like you're selling sales products, right? I've never sold go to market products like you, but you have to appeal to the AEs, and then get budget from the CRO. The days of getting the CRO to implement something down to the AEs is you're gambling there, right? And I think the same
Right.
thing is happening with the same thing is relevant for the technical sell. So, the personas that you're selling to, one, they live in a world. Their job is predicated on bringing forth the best technology to help them do their jobs. And as sellers, just by trade, we are professional sellers. We are not professional DevOps engineers or data engineers or what have you. So their world is much more technical and complex than we'll ever know. And so being able to help them buy the best solution relative to the market or industry that you're in, I think is the job. And so being technically curious, I think, is always a really good trait to have as a seller. Being upfront and honest with the market opportunity that your company provides, but also the challenges that we tend to see across other customers that are in their space, I think is relatively important. So those type of patterns I see again across data engineers that are focused on analytics, developers that are building applications, DevOps teams that are managing the infrastructure and those sort of things. You really have to drive the level of adoption at the IC level, but then tie that value to a C-suite, to CIO, CTO, but at the same time appeal and pass the standards of the infrastructure platform teams that are putting together security practices that the CIO has mandated, for example. So there's that three-legged stool that you'll hear me reference a lot that I think is pretty relevant. But being able to appeal to all three of those is really, really critical in this type of sale.
Wow, a lot of great stuff here. So let me pinpoint one, which I think is great. It's like curiosity. I think I wholeheartedly agree that like you have to be curious to be in this job. You have to be, because I mean, caring means also like curiosity to like what are their problems, what is that we need to solve, because only then you can really sell, and which means bringing a product that can solve their problem. My curiosity for you is like, it seems, as you explained, like different, very different motions, like, appealing to an individual developer who maybe loves certain things like about simplicity and free tools and stuff like that, then versus like selling to like a leadership layer or like an enterprise buyer. First, I'm curious about like, where have you found more like personal enjoyment into selling? And two, what are like the motions to like grow both set of buyers? So like, what have you done in your career to say like, oh, the bottom up approach in order to scale needs to have this versus like, the enterprise led sales like needs to have this other like set of features?
Certainly. I think to answer your first question around enjoyment, I enjoy the engine of revenue, right? I enjoy the how product marketing is thinking about taking the product to market, how marketing and BDRs and outbound prospecting is thinking about creating demand and pipeline, how the sales team is executing across enterprise mid-market, how our back-end operations team is supporting the workflows of the AEs, and we're building out territory management dashboards, and really like the whole thing that fits together, right? I make a lot of references um, to like collegiate sports, but like in the U.S., college football is a huge deal, and the product that they put on the field, I think, is very, very important. But at the same time, and pick your sport or pick your industry, music, what have you. But like all the pieces have to put together, the production, the musicians, the conductor, the whole thing has to fit well in harmony. And I think that's really the ultimate role of the CRO. And what I really enjoy is both the science and and all the sales process that we put in place, but also the art of figuring out who and how and why customers buy from us and how to replicate that and create it to be more durable. Um, in terms of the like how to appeal and how to build these certain things, I think you can never be a master of everything, right? You have to be able
Right.
to be a great leader, and to be a great leader, you have to attract great talent, and you have to set proper expectations. I liken it a lot to a CEO, right? Most CEOs are very product focused, engineering focused, go to market focused, what have you. They're not all of the functions. You know what I mean? So they have to be great at being a leader about driving direction and expectations and strategy, and then holding leaders accountable to outcomes, while also using their team to collaborate. And I think, again, revenue leaders' role is very similar. I think you hire really strong enterprise leaders to help run your enterprise business. You hire a really strong, proven RevOps leader to run your RevOps team, and so on and so forth across all the dimensions. So I think that when it comes to like attacking the SMB mid-market space, where maybe most of your customers or buyers are adopting the free product, you have to kind of have a first principles thinking in terms of how do you go to market, what the team should be focused on, how they should be compensated, incentivized, versus maybe your enterprise team who is going after a segment or market that doesn't have as many warm inbounds, that has to be really surgically focused on going after the right type of account, and not spending their time across 50 accounts, but maybe rather 3 or 5 accounts. But you have to make damn sure that those 3 to 5 accounts are well within your ICP. So I think it's you have to like take it down to the foundational element of each part of your business, and what matters the most, and how you can drive outcomes and execute.
The metaphor of the orchestra is great. The
Yeah.
conductor. So
Yeah.
absolutely
I'm a
love it.
I'm a former collegiate athlete, so it's hard for me to stay away from sports references, but I know it's not applicable for everybody.
So
Music,
football or what?
baseball. Yeah,
Baseball.
baseball.
Okay, very good. And you mentioned territory mapping, and before starting SkillStack, I didn't have a full appreciation of the importance of that. And you have talked a lot. You seem to be like an expert, almost like a superpower, like the territory management process, which is core because like distributing an equitable book of business across the org is one of the ways the conductor can do that. Can you tell us some of your secrets there? Like, walk us through like some of the philosophy that you applied at companies that you built.
Yeah, this is. I feel like still this is a wide open market opportunity, and I feel like there's technology like ScaleStack that are coming after this market in particular. But I just think that there's no one has quite figured out the Rubik's cube. I think of really out of the box territory management, and I think it's difficult because every company is different. And I think that your job as a CRO is to create a common denominator across all of your sales organization, so that the variable of execution is the people that you hire, and their willingness and attitude and output of activity determines the outcome of them. So meaning you I think where things fall apart as a sales leader, as a CRO, and as a frankly, as a culture, is when you have part of your organization or part of one person on a team that is highly successful, but the success is determined on the accounts that they got, and everybody knows that in the company or on the sales team. Everybody knows
Yeah.
that, and so your job is to create a meritocracy of accounts. And as you scale, as you take your sales team from 10 to 50 to 125 sellers, doing that in a methodical way and doing that in a data driven way, I think is the only way to do it. And so I think from a territory management perspective, many companies make the mistake, in my opinion, of doing segmentation across, employees and size. I know there has to be an element of that to be able to draw clear lines between your segments internally. But I think there's more. It's also more than just technical demographics. So meaning, many companies say, our ICP is over 1,000 employees and they use XYZ technology.
Mhm.
I think it's actually deeper than that. I think there's an element of, you have to understand the culture of the companies that you sell to. What is the willingness to change, and how low or high is that barrier of entry to get in? And being able to assess that from the outside in, looking at certain signals, whether it be people that they've hired or job description information, that level of detail, starting inward first of understanding who buys from you, I think is the first place. And so to quote our good friend Justin Dignelli, it's like, where, how, and why you win, and understanding that first and foremost, that determines who your real ICP is. And then from there, ranking your territory by what is the prime account, right? Like if you were to make up a company, what would they look like? And then find real companies that look like that. Those are your A accounts. And then, or your tier one accounts. Your step down from that would be an account that looks like that, but maybe has some higher barrier of entry. So for example, if you're selling a DevOps tool, but the DevOps leader at a company has been there for, 18 years, and it's very obvious that that person holds influence in the organization, they may be a much more difficult account to penetrate. And then you have the one below that, which is like, you're going to take a flyer on this account, maybe or maybe not, it works, but it just seems like a far fetch. But like if you were to land them, it would be a multi-million-dollar deal. And so then you end up having 3, 4, 5, rankings of accounts, whatever the business needs, and you focus your marketing efforts, your sales efforts, the amount and level of activity across all of those. And so then it becomes like a very focused and efficient outbound motion that ends up, I think, yielding some of the best results.
Very interesting. And I mean, the way you explain it, like, it reminds me of a lot of the motion that we have, like, supported at MongoDB and other companies. I think, we talked about like how difficult, or maybe not, is like tech sales. Markets are certainly becoming more complex and more competitive, and like, it's, gaining visibility is harder and harder. And I think that the name of the game is prioritization. So the companies that
Yes.
know how to prioritize their efforts are the ones that succeed. And that's why territory mapping and like distribution of accounts is so important. And
100%.
what I've seen is that like the companies that can do that, or not just once a year, but sort of dynamically during the year, are the ones that succeed.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think you've had several ex MongoDB people on here, but like
Yeah.
we, rewinding the clock back 7, 8 years. I mean, we had a good understanding of who and why people bought from us. And then we were tasking the sales reps to then figure that out on themselves. So we would, the VPs would then allocate accounts to new hires. And then we would say, come back to us in a couple of weeks and give us your best accounts. Then we were like, how can we make this more efficient? And, Megan Gill allowed us to hire a territory analyst, and that territory analyst, reported to James Underhill. And then we found it to be successful. So we added another one, and we found it to be more successful. And James and team ended up building tooling for it. And then it became an actual consultative, proactive practice that we ended up, embedding globally across the company. And then they built, a product that they released a blog about with Argos. And now it's a full functioning thing. And my point is that, like, when you have that strong understanding of who buys from you, when they buy, why they buy, like, it's then your job, especially in this day of AI and automation, of how do you create that system, that dashboard, that, that the operating system that your entire team can operate off of. And then you can not only assess the allocation of accounts, but I think go one level deeper and understand the account executive activity and the marketing activity within those accounts as well. Because I think that's the next level of, okay, now that we've allocated all these accounts, what is the level of activity that's happening in this account, right? Two-way communication, outbounding to more than 3 people, the cadence and frequency of communication, because then you can really assess, your opportunity. So again, another example, if you have a team in New York and everybody has equal accounts, at least based on the data, and you have one sales rep that is crushing their number, and they have 15 accounts, and you do a deeper analysis, and they have 10 A accounts, but 3 of their A accounts are getting them to the number. Those other 7 A accounts are just sitting there. And there could be another AE or another team of AEs that could be getting to their number. And that's hidden revenue within the business. And so being able to proactively identify that, reallocate, move accounts, split territories, that's really how you scale, but also do so to that creates repeatable productivity as you scale.
I love that. And yes, like this idea that like those accounts are not yours, but they are yours if you extract the, the potential business value is very important. We have seen that across like this most successful teams. Another thing that you were describing, in my opinion, is this very strong and mutually respectful collaboration between like, the field, the sales teams and the ops team. And like, I think that the understanding of that dynamic differentiates like great companies from companies that are not going to be able to scale that fast. Because if you want to scale, that collaboration, is key. And invariably, in my experience, like, if we observe that, companies are going to be more successful. There's mutual respect, there's a common goal. The ops systems and processes needs to support sales. Sales needs to spend time and be curious about like understanding the complexity of all of that, while ops needs to be curious and understanding the needs of the sales teams and why are they clamoring for this type of insights or data or processes themselves. And so I like that description of like the dynamic between you and Megan and James, because like that's what we've seen at like successful companies. What else do you think is important as you scale fast? I mean, there is only like a limited number of companies that like scale fast, and you've been part of like several successful of these companies. What besides maybe this collaboration, if you agree, but like what are the other things traits you saw at scaling companies that succeeded?
I think first and foremost, product market fit rules all, right? I think if you try to scale your organization or your business without that, and you're relying on a low participation rate and doubling or tripling your sales team, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of inefficiency. And I think, now going forward, I think that is a very important aspect of the job. If product market fit is there and it's just a matter of, executing on a go-to-market motion that is repeatable and durable, then I think, hiring is of the utmost importance. And I think that what many companies don't appreciate about companies that scale extremely fast is the level of rigor that goes into to hiring really top talent. And there's almost sometimes an overemphasis on it, because you have to hire really high quality at a really high velocity, but also do so in a way that is respectful, and also you're being thoughtful about the makeup of your team, the diversity of your team, where you're getting your talent from, how you're developing that talent, the engine that you're trying to create.
Mhm.
So I think that like the thing with scaling companies is you have to build a development engine when it comes to the BDRs that you hire today are going to be your mid-market reps that you promote, a year and a half from now, that become your enterprise reps 2 to 3+ years from now. And if you can do all that while also retaining them and also making them successful and giving them leaders that they respect, that are well trained and can develop them, whether you promote leaders internally or hire them from the outside, that's like the infrastructure of your sales team and your sales culture to help you scale. Because if you don't have that, it all falls apart. And you can't just hire externally, because they lack context. It's a longer path to trust. You also
You
can't
can use a sports
Yeah.
metaphor here for sure.
No, sport. You also can't promote everyone internally, right? If you have to hire 15 sales leaders over the next year, there's an element of bringing in outside diversity, both in, gender, but also in experience and other company practices. I mean, some of the best things that I learned in my, last 15 plus years has been from people that come from other companies that have best practices that you end up incorporating and folding in, that end up giving you this situation where you're operating at a really high level.
Lots of amazing things. Culture, hiring. I spend time at Amazon, so Amazon is crazy about like hiring and like the processes around that. And so I'm a big believer in like hiring well is so key to scaling. And absolutely agree that also like, the composition of the team and who do you hire from outside versus who do you grow internally are all really important dimensions of growth. I mean, like one of the things that like I remember, at Amazon, I was a bar raiser, which is this basically persona of like somebody that has done a lot of interviews and then becomes, and joins like other people's hiring processes, other managers' hiring processes and they have like a veto power. So if the hiring manager wants to hire, but the bar raiser says no, you cannot hire that person. And I mentioned this because a lot of the training that I did as a bar raiser was around bias. And you recently wrote, in my opinion, a beautiful LinkedIn post. And if people haven't read it, please go and like on Javier's LinkedIn page and search for this conscious or unconscious bias post. I'm very curious about like, if you're hiring fast, you can make mistake of bias, right?
Yes.
And so how do you instill that, like, okay, you want to hire fast, but also you need to check your conscious or unconscious biases? How have you achieved that in the orgs that you have led?
It's a really good question, and yeah, that article was, if you read the article, it was built out of an opportunity to be able to share my own story of someone that like deeply cares about unconscious bias, that was, that had an unconscious bias in a moment. And I think that, the thing that we have to realize is that we are biased as humans, right? Like we face this bias every single day. We do it personally in our social networks. Like think about your closest friends, or if you're married or not, like who are the people that you hang out with the most? My wife and I, we've been married for going on 17 years now. We have 3 kids. We hang out typically with, people that we knew from college, people that have kids. That's like our social network, because that's our bias, because it's socially convenient. And I have faced bias myself throughout my career. I face bias even to this day. Even yesterday, right? Like I'm too enterprise for some companies, or I'm not enterprise enough. I'm from Austin, but I'm not from San Francisco or New York. So can they respect that level of talent? I'm too young. I'm too young for a certain role, or I'm too senior because I've seen too much scale. And I just always have this feeling of feeling in between, and it's like it's other people's bias, and it's my job, I think, to figure out how to communicate myself and put myself in a situation where I can remove that bias from other people when they're facing me. And so as a hiring leader, I think of my role as a CRO, and I've said this for the past several roles, is like I have 3 goals. Number 1, if you come and work in my organization, regardless of what role that you have, I want you to develop personally and professionally, either directly through me or through the leaders that I have on board. And if you don't feel like that's happening, then that's an issue, right? So I want to create this development culture where you're always becoming bigger and better versions of yourself. 2, because we all, we work in tech, and everybody wants to be successful. I want everybody to have a successful outcome, whether that's, getting to a higher level role, or a VP level role, or, a financial outcome, that is really important to me. And then 3, changing the landscape of software sales, right? I mean, the way I think about it is, if you're working in a multi-billion-dollar organization, or even a startup, you're investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year to get people together, to train them, to put them through boot camp, to help them become a better seller, or what have you. That's a think about it as a university. And if you're not taking that opportunity to then hire people that can develop into enterprise sellers or CROs or VPs of sales one day in tech 5, 10 plus years from now, and you're not being conscious with the type of people that you hire and where you hire from, then it's a missed opportunity, because then it's just going to look the same. And so, like, I just think that being conscious about your hiring practices, where you source talent from, where you get how much are referrals versus how much is intentional outbound, um, taking taking what seems to be a chance on somebody when it's actually you're just removing your own bias, and hiring, putting somebody in a great opportunity. Like, I have multiple examples of people that on paper I think they wouldn't have been the down the middle candidate for what we set out to hire, but in the end they ended up exceeding everybody that got hired because of just their drive, the ambition, the intelligence. And I just think that, like, we're in such a leveraged position as a CRO or VP of sales when you're hiring talent in your organization to be conscious about your own bias, and you can really make a change and make an impact.
Amazing. Please read that article. It's really good. And I think that being aware of like the biases makes us better leaders and better like humans, actually, because also a lot of the biases I feel come from not knowing. You just don't know. A lot of the bias, you just don't know that other person or that other like group of people, and like you have very limited knowledge, and that's why you're biased. So the majority or all of the biases, I have to think about this, but probably all of them are you actually don't know. And so that's why you instinctively react in a certain way, because you've
Yes,
been like limited to a certain knowledge, you don't have the other knowledge. And so you can't really judge, and you use bias to get to that quick judgment.
really well put.
Very good. Maybe last question is you have grown a lot of like sales leaders over your career. What is like maybe an advice, and maybe like even a contrarian piece of advice that you've given or that you've received over the course of your career that like you think it's very useful in terms of like developing leadership skills and capabilities of managing sales teams?
Contrarian advice to developing leaders. Is that what you're saying? What you're asking?
Yeah, so like something that like you have advised your leaders or people that you've coached to become leaders in the organization that you have led, or maybe advice that you have received as you were growing your career that was counterintuitive or contrarian to like what people normally think, and that you have applied or have seen people apply successfully.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to go two routes on this one. Number one, I think you have to treat recruiting like revenue. I think I think the thing with sales is that, quota is the most quantifiable thing in the company, right? Like, how do you grade a seller? How much do they get to, how well do they get to their quota? How much do they exceed it by? And I think that's just such a bad way to assess someone, because, like I mentioned earlier with territory, I've had really, mediocre sellers be the number one person on the stack rank because of a deal that they got, that was handed over to them or transitioned from another rep or was inbound, what have you. And so how you get to your number is so much more important to me than you get to your number. Because
Mm.
if you have really strong outbound processes, you follow a repeatable sales motion, you do great discovery, you can build great champions, you can fill in all the med pick boxes, and do a great job across the board of facilitating stakeholders in a large enterprise, and you only get to 90% of your number, I would take that every single day over someone that lands two large enterprise deals and they really can't speak to the problem that they solve. They didn't have a strong champion, so on and so forth, because the first one is repeatable at scale. You can put them in any environment, whatever technology that they're selling, and they're going to be successful. The quota is a arbitrary thing. Me and the RevOps leader set your quota. So, like, being able hitting 90% or hitting 130%, that's a number that we set
Yeah.
in the beginning of the year. Your ability to repeat that process to be able to close deals, that is dependent on the individual. And so I think that is one thing that I teach sales leaders, is to understand at a deeper level, at an intimate level, how are your sellers performing every single day? What do they do at an activity level, from putting together their account plans to their outbound prospecting, to how they run meetings, how they prepare other executives to meet with their champions, to how they build champions, to how they approach procurement conversations. All of the details matter. And I think if you're in the details, then you can really make an impact. So I think that's one. I think the second piece that I'm giving these days around contrarian advice is, I think many things are changing. I think there's a modernization of sales that's happening. And we're starting to see signals from it. It started being like the more data-driven CRO, but now you have AI. We're talking about diversity. We're in a phase where we haven't really crossed a chasm yet, but we will soon. And so the core fundamentals still win, right? You need to focus on enterprise. You need to be, you have all of your foundational principles around your 3 whys and MedPick and doing great discovery, but they need to be applied in more modern ways. You're going to be using AI. You need to be more conscious of marketing paths. You need to be, understand, about how people come into your sales funnel, so that you can teach different playbooks depending on the situation that your customers come walking into. I think gone are the days of, hey, here's the top 10 banks in New York, and go prospect into them. I think you have to think more strategically and more data driven around how you approach revenue.
Javier, this was great. Thank you so much for this conversation. We touched on, I think, very important topics that go from like leadership and bias and hiring to like the data-driven and curious approach that we'd like our sales teams to operate within. So thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck for everything. And to all of you, thank you for joining us. And until next time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye.